We're now learning more details about the background of the woman killed in the Minneapolis ICE-involved shooting, seen in today's newly released video with her wife interacting with the ICE agent. DHS confirming that Renee Good was a member of an ICE Watch group organized to monitor and document immigration enforcement operations across the country. Let's bring in Fox News contributor and former NYPD Inspector Paul Mauro and former acting director and attorney Jonathan Fahey. Guys, welcome to you both. Okay, lots to dig into here. Paul, I'm gonna start with you. We just got a great report from Mike Emanuel, kind of talking about the spontaneity. All of a sudden, these protests just erupt overnight in these places. And I've been interested in another aspect of that, which is the idea that some of the folks who are part of these protests are observers, although they seem much more involved in the thing than you would expect by the word observer. Paul, what do you make of all that?
I think one of the things that people don't realize, that certainly the police in the major cities and here in New York realize, is that agitator, activist, protester, whatever you want to call it, is a career path for a lot of people in today's left. And if you dig in far enough, ultimately you find out that they are drawing salaries that are, at least in part, funded by American taxpayers. They get all kinds of grants, always from the Democratic Party or left-leaning groups that have ties to the Democratic Party. We all know the names, we've all heard it. And that ecosystem just churns and churns and churns. And the police see the same faces, the same people with all of a sudden, miraculously overnight, printed placards that are out there on the street. In some cases, they'll tell you that they're being paid. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's what went on here. But I would say, though, that I would like to know, what was the gainful employment for the people that, in the middle of the day, were blocking ICE activities and committing federal felonies? That stuff never gets looked into, and so it gets perpetuated. And all I'll say is, when the right loses elections, we lose elections, and we go back and we try to win elections. When the left loses elections, you get chaos.
Jonathan, you know, Paul made the point about these folks who show up, and do they get paid? Is this their job, basically? It's like the issues float, but the same people are always there, right? It could be, it's climate one day, and then it's Palestine another day, and then it's Minneapolis, and then it's back to communism, and then maybe it's housing in New York City. But it's like the same group of people always there. And to me, the common thread, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, the common thread is always, how do we make chaos out of some issue? What do you think?
Right. I think that's such a good point. It's basically the same people just changing uniforms and pretending they're with a different team when it's always the same people. And you're right. The idea is always subversion, disruption. And we saw it back in 2020. And I don't think the American people are going to take the bait this time, because it was portrayed in 2020, the George Floyd summer was portrayed as almost organic protesting, that people were coming out there to get their voices heard, when in fact that was not true, or by and large not true. It's these same groups, and they want to disrupt and make things harder and obstruct. And Paul is exactly right. You know, the irony is, the only people here acting legitimately are the ICE agents, even though they're always called illegitimate and undemocratic. They're the only people acting out the democratic process, because they're enforcing laws passed by a democratically elected Congress, enforced by a democratically elected president, and they're the ones that people are standing in their way. It's so shameful when you see Tim Walz, you see that mayor in Minneapolis do everything they can to undermine the rule of law. And now after this happens, their solution is, now ICE should stop enforcing the law, which is what they wanted all along. It's totally bizarre.
Paul, the FBI has control of the investigation, but when you hear Governor Tim Walz speak, he keeps saying he wants Minnesota involved. Do you think Minnesota should be involved in the investigation?
Well, whatever I think is irrelevant, because they won't be. The bottom line is that the FBI, who's conducting the investigation, will be their Civil Rights Division likely, is not going to share with Minnesota. And furthermore, even if Minnesota does go through the pantomime of bringing charges, history and the law shows that it'll get removed to federal court, where once again, the feds are going to be in charge. You look into the history of a case like, say, Ruby Ridge, which many people have heard of. They tried this, it didn't go. You really, as a federal agent, have to be operating with just impunity way outside guidelines, really has to be purposeful. I don't see those circumstances here. I'm not saying this whole thing went perfectly, by the way. I want to be clear on that. Nobody wanted this woman to be dead, and I'm sure this agent looks back and wishes things went differently, but he didn't create these conditions. And the bottom line is ICE was there lawfully. The women who were blocking them in and committing a federal felony by blocking them in and escalating the situation, they were the ones who were not there lawfully.
Jonathan, how much does the latest video that we saw, where you've got the agent's camera and he's moving around the vehicle, it gives you a very different perspective. I'm just curious how much of a difference you think that makes to an objective investigator in how they would assess the situation.
I think that is very strong evidence supporting what the officer did, because, like we've seen over the years with so many of these types of incidents, the first sort of version that comes out isn't what ultimately the truth is. You see different angles, different perspectives, but this clearly shows she went directly at the officer, and I think this officer did what he was trained to do, protecting himself and other officers. But I think it's funny, after it came out, my initial take would be everyone would now be on board with the agent, and people on the left are still saying, oh, it doesn't show what it shows, or they have a different view. But ultimately, this agent is not going to be prosecuted by the federal government.
Before we go, Paul, real quick, you were outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan today as Luigi Mangione was back in court. What's the latest in the case?
So ultimately what's going to happen here, in my estimation, they argued over whether or not the bag and the journal that was in the bag is going to come in. And my feeling from trying to read the tea leaves of the judge's reactions is that that is going to come in. However, the judge appeared skeptical of the federal government's approach here to get the murder charge in through the use of a stalking statute. You need what's called a federal hook to get a federal murder charge. You need another statute as the sort of gateway. And the judge seemed skeptical of the theory of using the stalking statute here as the gateway to that murder charge. I wouldn't be surprised, this is just a prediction, I'm trying to read the body language in the comments. I wouldn't be surprised if the contents are going to come in of the bag, almost certainly, but I wouldn't be surprised if the death penalty comes off the table, the murder charge goes away, and the top penalty would be life for the stalking charge. That's how it looks to me like it's going to shake out.
Okay, got it. Paul, Jonathan, I always learn a lot from you guys. Thanks for sharing your expertise tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.